And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're back in business with a showdown between the Wood Elves, who shall be led by Drycha. And today, my friends, we face off against the Dwarves, who shall be led by Arocrastic and a mighty Runesmith. I think he's going to be on the Anvil as well, which is actually a very clever ploy, because one of the new, very efficient AP units on the Wood Elf roster, the Bladesingers do, of course, do magic damage. So if the entire Dwarven army is getting extra magic resist on top of their already, pretty good magic resist here, let's take a look. They get the 15% from the Locus of Power, so they're up to 40%. So these dwarves, even like basic rangers, are going to be taking 40% less damage from my Bladesingers. Definitely a very clever play there from Arocrastic. Now, as far as my army goes, it is going to be Bladesingers in the back. I believe I have 4 in total. So yes, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 Eternal Guard here with shields in the middle, and Eternal Guard are okay against Dawi. They're shielded against missile play like rangers and things like that. And they also do have relatively decent armor piercing value, so I'd like to mix them in here and there. Now, Drycha is also going to be another big winner against the Dawi, in my opinion, because she has 2 summons of the Malevolent Dryads. So Rouse to Wrath does summon 2 Dryad units, which are a little bit stronger than basic Dryads. But the really juicy thing about these guys is you summon them on top of Slayers. And when the Slayers are locked on by Dryads, especially stronger Dryads, they're going to be taking more damage. And it really opens up your cavalry and other mobile units to get into the back line when the Slayers are just bogged up fighting Dryads, who Dryads are also very quick. They can kind of keep pace with these Slayers and do a good job. Aside from that, we do have Pendulum, and of course she does have her Fanatical Resolve ability, which does give melee attack and makes weapon damage. It only happens if she's focused down. I think she baseline gives +5/+5, but if she gets lower, she can give even more. Now, aside from that, some of the new assets that are very good against Dawi are going to be Glade Riders with Spears, #1, because they're cheap, they're shielded, they're effective at just compromising missile positions, and if you lose them, it's not like you're losing a Wild Rider like you did before, right? So yeah, definitely very useful for just being cheap and effective at pushing into the Dwarf lines. Now, here in the backfield, we do have the Great Stag Knights, and Great Stag Knights are going to be hardcore MVPs against Dwarves. Now, you might be asking, in the Empire matchup, for example, Demogryph Knights, yeah, they are kind of similar, right? Demogryph Knights have lances with AP and shields, but they're not good against Dwarves, but Great Stag Knights are a bit different. Firstly, they have silver shields, and they also have 90 speed. So these guys can really stick and move a little bit more effectively than demis, and they also are opened up by other aspects of your roster, like a cheap skirmish cav unit. Empire doesn't have something like Glade Riders with Spears. Their cheapest thing is an Empire Knight, so you can definitely cause a pretty big diversion using your Glade Riders with Spears, and then the Great Stag Knights can get in more effectively from there. So for Arrow's army, it's going to be a pretty classic anti-Wood Elf build, and this was a matchup that, historically speaking, pre-DLC, I would say was very, very tough for Wood Elves. And now I would say it's much more, of an even matchup. So for Arrow here, he's got Rangers. He's got 3 in total. He does also have Miners with Blasting Charges, 2 more Rangers here. And in the back, Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, some Slayers. I really, really love the play, though, of the Rune Lord on the Anvil. That is such massive damage mitigation he's getting out of that. He also has 2 Organ Guns, which are very terrifying. If the Organ Guns are able to shoot at any of my elite cav units or infantry, it will most certainly tear them to pieces. And in the back, more Quarrelers and more Slayers. So yeah, the Dwarven bows have always traded very well with Wood Elf bows, simply because they're shielded and very, very cheap, and also very stalwart as it pertains to leadership. So we'll see how this goes, but again, it is a very different build. We are coming in with a rush, and one of the big weaknesses of the Bladesingers, of course, is the focus fire coming in from the Rangers, so I do see that coming, and make sure to pull those ladies back. And, I need to time it a little bit better, just move them up when my other assets get here. So this is also a huge advantage that the Stag Knights have over Demogryph Knights in this matchup, is that the Great Stag Knights can actually Vanguard in the tree line. So the Vanguard comes in from behind, people don't expect it. The Glade Riders with Spears move onto the Rangers here, but they are afflicted by a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, but just see what I'm saying? It opens up the Great Stag Knights. So now the Stag Knights are coming in, and they're going to crump whatever they hit. Over here we get Stag Knights engaging as well. Blasting Charges wreck my Glade Knights, or my Glade Riders, but really it's all about the Stag Knights. And here they come, downhill charge, a brutal Christmas coming early to these Dawi, and that is so much shock damage. And that's one of the things. Oftentimes Wild Rider charges wouldn't do this kind of damage on impact, and you would just take so much damage on the return. But from here, the Stag Knights can keep doing their thing. We do also have more Stag Knights over here, just wrecking some of these Miners with Blasting Charges, and these 2 Bladesingers are going to be getting around the flank and getting into the back line, which is exactly what you want here. Drycha, in the meantime, just waddling up. I'm trying to get her as close as I can to the back line so she can drop some Dryad summons here. And now these Slayers from Arocrastic are responding. So the 2 Slayers are going to be moving in, going after the Great Stag Knights. So suddenly it's a bit of a bad situation. Stag Knights do die very badly, but Drycha is here, fear not. She summons the Malevolent Dryads, which if you take a look, not only are they purple, but they also do have better combat stats. So they'll be doing their thing and fighting those guys. Pendulum going down as well, and the Quarrelers here in the back line. But now the Bladesingers have engaged against Slayers, and they're taking a lot of damage, but Bladesingers, something about them that's very noteworthy is that they have insane leadership. They can hold very long in bad situations, which is going to buy even more time for the Great Stag Knights to really compromise. So here the Way Watchers unfortunately getting blasting charged. Bladesingers here fighting, doing pretty efficient, and the Malevolent Dryad summon holding back the Slayers and really allowing the Stag Knights to just continue to penetrate here. So here they come, charging once again into the Jawi down here in the river, and you can see, oh man, that is such a cool looking shot. Man, those are badass units. It almost makes me want to go look up their tabletop model, but yeah, Dwarves definitely taking a hammering. And the other unit here of the Great Stag Knights is able to move up into the cannon position. So now the Organ Guns, both of them, are going to be compromised as both Slayers are inundated in combat. The Bladesingers here are fighting these Slayers, and the other Slayers were pinned down by Dryads for quite some time, which would then allow the Great Stag Knights to come back here and really take out these Organ Guns. So far, you know, it's been a pretty even game. I've taken a lot of damage on my infantry. The Bladesingers are not cheap. They do cost 1,200, but the fact that we just shut down both Organ Guns in one go is a huge win here. Now the Great Stag Knights will easily chase down those crews, and there still are a fair amount of Slayers, but that's where the Bladesingers come in. Even with the magic resist, the Bladesingers have really good combat stats, 44, 42. They have a bonus for infantry, and against Slayers you can also turn on their second stance, which does give them some really good damage against light armor. So here come the Stag Knights charging into the back of the Dwarf Warriors, and the Bladesingers here are continuing to fight, and they're doing great across the board. We also have some Glade Riders with spears coming back, and again, it's so nice because historically Wood Elves would have to, if you want to chase something down or off the battlefield, you would basically have to use the Wild Riders, and that's 1,100 gold being used to chase down some Rangers, right? But in this case, you now have a bunch of cheap units that can chase things down, and a bunch of hard hitters that can really fill that role much more efficiently than the Wild Riders could. So like I said, just on the Wild Hunt here, just making sure things can't come back here, because it is a big factor in this matchup. Dwarves do have pretty good leadership, and if a bunch of sparse missile units come back all over the battlefield, for example, they're going to be able to shoot into my Great Stag Knights and really give me a ton of grief. So just making sure to get them all off the battlefield before we do go in for the Alpha Strike here. And now we do have Slayers engaging against Bladesingers, but the Bladesingers have popped the Whirling Death, which does give them 50 plus weapon strength. And on top of that, the Malevolent Dryads have come in, and they're going to be giving some extra low AP, high DPS damage here against these Slayers, and definitely will be doing very well. Drycha herself, I think, is lurking around somewhere. Yeah, here she is, kind of scurrying about, and she's dirt cheap too. In multiplayer with Drycha, just with Pendulum as well as the Dryad Summon, she only costs like 1,100 gold, which is awesome because it then opens up Great Stag Knights and a very elite army. Like, my army was super elite. Bladesingers cost about as much as Harganeth Executioners, Great Stag Knights cost as much as Demis, but you saw that my army still felt and looked pretty wide. So yeah, you can definitely get some good value out of the Stags, and having a very cheap lord like Drycha, who's also pretty good in combat. She would of course lose in combat to any combat dwarf lord, for example, like Grombrindle or Ungarum or any of those characters, especially after the buffs that Footlords have gotten. And she's a Footlord herself, but she does magic damage and lacks AP, so she's really not that great against these characters. But here the Rune Lord's forces have been broken, and that is going to be the end of the game, as the Slayers are pretty much about to be massacred by a horde of Dryads and Bladesingers. So well played, Arrow. It was certainly a fun game, and I feel like the matchup's pretty even now. I think Great Stag Knights are going to be huge MVPs. It's a little glass cannony though. If you get caught in a bad situation, a Rune of Wrath and Ruin or something, and they get focused down by Organ Guns, you can lose pretty bad. But if you really look at the breadwinners, 9,000 damage and 10,000 damage. Yeah, big damage there. These ones paid for themselves. These one didn't quite, but they were still alive and still could have done much damage over the course of a prolonged game. The Bladesingers did okay. The fact that Arrow had that very clever play of using the Rune Lord on the Anvil was really sexy, and that did a bunch of mitigation. Like, you can pretty much add 40% to all these damage values, and that's what they would have done if not for the Rune Lord. So these guys would have done over 1,000. These guys would have done close to 1,000. Like, it's a big play right there, getting the Rune Lord. And Drycha did okay. Again, she's just there to summon the Dryads and cast Pendulum, which she did well. And the Way Watchers, of course, did all right. They were just picking off value targets and shooting Slayers and things like that. But yeah, ultimately, I feel like this matchup's going to be much better for the Wood Elves. Having a Vanguard hard-hitting AP unit that's incredibly fast and silver shielded against Dwarves is great, because the build you saw from Arrow was kind of how Dwarves used to play against Wood Elves. Organ Guns just karate chop your Wild Riders and your infantry, and the Rangers can outtrade your archers, or at least outlast you. And Slayers, of course, are really tough to deal with, but I'll let you have a fast AP unit that also can be anti-light is also very nice. Having a cheap cav unit that can just cause disruption and take the initial beating and open up the pathways for the Great Stag Knights is super solid. Yeah, his build was good. I don't know. Yeah, I think this build is decent also. I would probably recommend it against Dwarves. However, I would make a couple slight changes. If he had brought Gyrocopters, I would have been in trouble. All I had was one unit of Way Watchers, which 2 Gyrocopters with the steam cannons could have just ganged up on and killed. And then from there, he would have had impunity in the skies, and it would have been stressful. So let's go ahead and take a look at a build we can do that I think might remedy that. But yeah, I think Drycha is the way in that matchup. Spellsingers are also very good, the new Spellsinger Lords, because they have an ability here called the Loex Blessing, which you can give something stock and unspottable, which against Dwarven Artillery is pretty good. Sisters also aren't bad, like the Dragon with the breath attacks and the ability to snipe artillery with the equal quivers look good, but against Dwarves, I don't like to bring big things they can focus fire down, with the exception of the Stag Knight. So honestly, with Drycha, you want to cut all this. The only ability you really need here is going to be Pendulum, and yeah, you don't really need the Fang, of course. So from here, we probably want to go triple Bladesinger and then double Stag Knight. The Ghostly Stag Knight's a cool option too, but really I don't feel like it's that useful against Dwarves. And 2 Hawk Riders as well. That will shut down any Gyrocopter play. Plus, Hawk Riders also have pretty good AP melee attack, so I think they'll be a good dual-purpose unit here. So the build's coming together. From here, we get some Glade Riders with Spears. And we can get a couple Eternal Guard just to flank. So you'll notice I'm cutting one of the Bladesingers here just to get a little bit of a wider build. And then 1 more cab unit. I think something like this could be good. Also, Hawk Riders with their missile attacks from the sky can do some pretty good damage against Slayers. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this Drycha quick battle. It's been quite a bit of fun playing with these new Wood Elf characters. Well played, Aerocrastic. We had a great series of games, all of which will be going up on the channel. And we will see you guys on the other side. Take care.